Ever wondered if something as simple as a patch of grass could rewrite the story of life itself? Imagine stepping into a world 200 million years ago, where the sun hangs low over a vast expanse of greenery, dew sparkling on leaves that are taller than a grown man. The air is thick with the smell of wet soil and the faint, sweet aroma of ancient ferns. You're standing in a field that stretches as far as the eye can see, each plant swaying gently in a breeze that feels almost alive, whispering secrets of a time long before humans would ever walk this earth. As you look closer, you notice the leaves of the American ferngrass, their intricate fronds catching the sunlight, forming patterns that seem deliberately designed to confuse, to mislead. From a distance, they appear ordinary, yet there is a strange sophistication to their arrangement, a subtle geometry that plays tricks on the eyes. Perhaps it's the uniform height, or the way the shadows shift across the ground, but suddenly what seemed like a simple field becomes a labyrinth, a puzzle crafted by nature itself. You take a careful step forward, trying to map the terrain, but every time you think you've grasped the layout, a cluster of ferns bends slightly in the wind, altering your perception. There's a rhythm to it, almost like the plants are responding to your presence, guiding your gaze in unexpected directions. The light filters through the leaves in beams that dance across the mossy ground, revealing glimpses of other plants interspersed among the ferngrass, yet they all seem to conform to the larger pattern, part of an ecosystem that's as much about optical illusion as it is about survival. You realize that navigating this landscape is a mental challenge as much as a physical one, because these ancient weeds have perfected the art of deception over millions of years. Some scientists today speculate that early observers, human or animal, could have been easily misled, mistaking patches of dense growth for clearings or pathways, affecting foraging routes and settlement patterns in ways we're only beginning to understand. And then there's the soundscape, a faint rustle of leaves that mimics movement, the distant hum of insects that adds to the sensation of life moving just out of reach, making you question whether the motion you see is real or just a trick of light and shadow. You start to notice patterns in the arrangement of fronds, subtle differences in texture and color that hint at evolutionary strategies, adaptations that allowed these plants to dominate certain areas while remaining almost invisible in others. Every step is a lesson in patience and observation. Every glance teaches you that appearances can be deceiving, that what looks simple may conceal a complex history of growth, competition, and survival. You feel a sense of awe, standing among these ancient weeds, realizing that they are silent historians, holding clues to climates, soils, and ecosystems that have long since disappeared. And as you move further into the field, the sunlight shifts, the breeze picks up, and for a moment, it feels as though the plants are alive in a way that transcends biology, communicating stories of an age when the world was very different from the one you know. The American ferngrass isn't just a plant, it's a witness to deep time, a participant in a natural drama that unfolded over millions of years, quietly shaping the landscape and subtly influencing the organisms that crossed its path. You pause and take it all in, the light, the movement, the sense of ancient continuity, understanding that this is more than a field of weeds, it's a living chronicle of Earth's history, waiting to be deciphered by those willing to observe, to notice, and to wonder. You take a careful step deeper into the field, noticing the layers of soil shifting beneath your feet and the subtle undulations in the terrain that are invisible from a distance. Each step reveals more about the ecosystem, from tiny spores catching sunlight to the faint outline of distant watercourses meandering across the landscape, hinting at sources of moisture that fed the plants for generations. The American ferngrass stretches out in endless waves, a mosaic of green that transitions from lighter shades near the water to darker, almost bluish tones on the drier ridges. As you move, you begin to see the interplay of light and shadow, how the leaves reflect and refract the early morning sun, creating patterns that make it difficult to distinguish individual plants from the collective whole. The breeze carries the scent of damp earth and the faint fragrance of pollen, a natural signal of reproductive activity that has persisted across millennia. You notice small insect-like creatures skimming along the leaves, not in fear but in harmony with the plants, their movements almost choreographed, as if the American ferngrass anticipates their flight paths and adjusts the sway of its fronds accordingly. It is a silent dialogue, a relationship that stretches back hundreds of millions of years, connecting the plants, the soil, and the climate into a single, dynamic system. You bend closer to examine the texture of the leaves, their ridged surfaces and segmented stems that have allowed them to thrive despite shifting water levels and changing weather patterns. The patterns repeat across the field, a rhythm that guides you as much as it confounds you, offering clues to the plant's adaptive strategies and resilience. In the distance, the terrain rises slightly, a gentle slope where shadows lengthen and the color of the plants shifts to a muted green, signaling the transition to a microclimate where moisture is less abundant. The field is dotted with clusters of other ancient species, each interacting with the American ferngrass in ways subtle yet crucial. Roots intertwine below the surface, creating networks of shared nutrients. Above ground, the taller fronds provide shelter and shade for smaller plants and creatures, influencing growth patterns and survival. You feel a sense of continuity, understanding that the landscape you see is the result of countless seasons, each one layering knowledge into the soil, each one shaping the plants and the organisms that inhabit this ecosystem. The air vibrates with quiet life, a symphony of sounds too delicate for human perception without careful attention. The rustle of fronds, the hum of movement across the ground, the occasional glint of sunlight reflecting off a leaf like a fleeting signal. You recognize that every detail, from the direction of a leaf to the placement of a stem, carries information about survival strategies, energy efficiency, and adaptation, preserved across ages. Walking further, you begin to piece together how this ecosystem might have misled early observers, how patterns in the plant arrangement could create illusions of open pathways, false clearings, or even suggest the presence of water or other organisms where there is none. The more you observe, the more you realize that the American ferngrass is not merely a static background but an active participant in the shaping of its environment, guiding and interacting with other species, including those that will evolve millions of years later. The field stretches onward, a continuous testament to resilience and subtle intelligence encoded in biological form, a reminder that in the ancient world, even something as seemingly simple as a patch of grass holds layers of complexity that challenge perception, invite curiosity, and offer insight into the deep interplay of life and landscape. Each step, each glance, deepens your understanding of the dynamics at play, creating a tapestry of sight, sound, and scent that immerses you fully in this ancient world, leaving an impression that will linger long after you leave, a lesson in observation, patience, and the quiet power of nature's enduring designs. As you continue through the dense growth, the terrain begins to rise gradually, revealing a gentle slope lined with even taller fronds that sway in unison, their shadows stretching long across the ground as the sun climbs higher into the sky. The interplay of light and shadow becomes more pronounced, highlighting the subtle differences in color and texture among the leaves, some glistening with morning dew while others display a muted, almost bluish hue that signals adaptation to the drier ridge soil. You notice the intricate network of stems beneath the canopy, each segment connected in a way that maximizes stability and access to sunlight, a silent engineering feat perfected over millions of years. The ground is carpeted with a mix of fallen fronds and small seedling shoots, evidence of constant renewal, and you spot tiny spores drifting lazily in the air, catching light like miniature stars suspended above the soil. Your senses are heightened as you observe the microclimate created by the dense vegetation. The air is cooler under the shade of the towering leaves, the humidity concentrated in pockets where water has collected in shallow depressions, and the faint scent of organic decay mingles with the aroma of fresh growth, a reminder of the ongoing cycle of life and decomposition that sustains this ecosystem. In the distance, small creatures scuttle through the undergrowth, navigating the maze of stems with surprising agility, their presence subtle yet constant, adding movement and rhythm to the landscape without disturbing the quiet order maintained by the American ferngrass. You become aware of the symbiotic relationships at play, roots interweaving below ground, sharing nutrients and supporting neighboring plants. Above ground, the fronds provide shade and microhabitats for insects and other organisms, influencing patterns of growth and distribution. The more you observe, the more you realize that the visual complexity of the field, with its repeating patterns and shifting perspectives, has likely led early observers to misinterpret the terrain, believing in open spaces or pathways that do not exist, a testament to the deceptive sophistication of these ancient plants. You pause to examine a cluster of fronds up close, running your fingers along their ridged surfaces, noting how the segmented stems provide flexibility in wind and stability in soil, a balance that allows the plants to thrive across varying conditions. Tiny water droplets collected on the leaves shimmer in the sunlight, reflecting glimpses of the surrounding ecosystem in miniature, a kaleidoscope that shifts with every breeze, every movement of the fronds. The field appears almost alive, not just in its growth and reproduction, but in the way it interacts with light, air, and movement, subtly guiding perception and influencing the behavior of any organism navigating it. You take a slow, deliberate step forward, aware of how your own presence alters the patterns of light and shadow, the way the fronds sway and the insects respond, an intricate dance that has been repeated countless times over the millennia. Observing from this closer vantage point, you start to appreciate the scale and duration of evolutionary processes that produced such complexity, understanding that the arrangement of the plants, the timing of their growth, and the physical properties of their fronds are all the results of adaptive strategies honed over hundreds of thousands of seasons. Each detail carries information about survival, resource allocation, and environmental interaction, creating a tapestry that tells the story of persistence and resilience. As the slope rises, you notice the gradient of plant coloration and density shifting, subtle changes indicating variations in moisture, sunlight exposure, and soil composition, a living map of ecological dynamics that extends across the landscape. Your attention is drawn to the interplay between the American ferngrass and neighboring species, how their forms, spacing, and growth patterns create both competition and cooperation, shaping the structure of the ecosystem in ways that are simultaneously orderly and dynamic. The sounds of the field deepen your sense of immersion, rustling fronds, distant movements, and the faint hum of wind through the leaves create a multi-layered auditory experience that mirrors the visual complexity. Each moment spent observing reveals new patterns and relationships, reinforcing the idea that even what appears static is part of a living, breathing system, one that has adapted and thrived through changes in climate, soil, and surrounding life forms. You begin to see the forest not merely as a collection of plants, but as a highly structured community, each element contributing to the stability and function of the whole, a network of interactions that extend far beyond what the eye can immediately perceive. Every glance offers new insight, each step deepens your understanding, and the field of American ferngrass continues to unfold its secrets, inviting careful observation and reflection, revealing the subtle intelligence encoded in natural form and the quiet power of evolutionary design over deep time. As the morning sun rises higher, the landscape transforms once again, revealing layers of texture and color previously hidden in shadow. You notice subtle shifts in the terrain, gentle rises and dips that guide the flow of water and air across the field, affecting the distribution of the American ferngrass and its neighboring species. Light filters through the fronds in ever-changing patterns, creating a moving mosaic that highlights the delicate veins of each leaf, and you realize that these patterns are more than aesthetic. They influence temperature, moisture retention, and even the activity of small organisms that navigate this complex environment. The air carries a faint, earthy scent, a mixture of minerals from the soil and the natural fragrance of the plants, enhancing the sensory immersion as you continue your careful exploration. As you move forward, the density of the plants varies, forming natural corridors and pockets where sunlight reaches the ground, allowing smaller plants to thrive and creating microhabitats that support an unseen variety of life. You bend closer to observe the stems, noting the intricate segmentation and resilience that allow the plants to bend and sway without breaking, a design perfected through countless generations of adaptation. Tiny insects and other creatures traverse the fronds, moving with a rhythm that seems synchronized with the subtle sway of the leaves, a dance of mutual awareness that has likely persisted for millennia. You start to recognize the subtle cues in the environment, the direction of a leaf, the tilt of a frond, or the concentration of moisture in a particular area, each hinting at the underlying ecological strategies that have allowed the American ferngrass to dominate and adapt through changing climates and soil conditions. The field seems to pulse with quiet life, a living network of interactions that includes the roots underground, the stems above, and the organisms that depend on them for shelter, food, or pollination. Each element contributes to the stability of the ecosystem while remaining flexible enough to respond to subtle environmental changes. As you pause to take in the view from a slight elevation, the full scale of the field becomes apparent, undulating waves of green that stretch toward distant ridges, each shift in color or height telling a story of adaptation, competition, and cooperation. You notice how the American ferngrass alters its growth in response to neighboring plants, sunlight, and water availability, creating patterns that have likely misled observers in the past into underestimating the complexity of the ecosystem. The wind moves through the fronds, creating a symphony of rustling sounds that overlap with the occasional hum of small creatures navigating the canopy, reinforcing the sense that this environment is dynamic and responsive, a network of life operating on both visible and invisible levels. As you carefully navigate the pathways formed by natural openings in the dense growth, you reflect on how such ancient vegetation could have shaped the perceptions and behaviors of early organisms, influencing movement, feeding, and interactions in subtle but significant ways. You recognize the importance of observation, patience, and interpretation in understanding the full scope of this living landscape, realizing that each detail, from the direction of a stem to the arrangement of fronds, holds information about survival strategies that have evolved over millions of years. The subtle interplay of light, shadow, color, and movement creates a sense of depth and complexity that extends beyond immediate perception, inviting deeper reflection on the interconnectedness of life and environment. Every step reinforces the awareness that the American ferngrass is more than a passive background. It is an active participant in the shaping of its ecosystem, influencing both the physical structure of the landscape and the behaviors of the creatures that inhabit it. You pause to absorb the scene fully, noting how each shift in wind, light, or movement creates new perspectives, new insights, and new questions, emphasizing the intricate balance and quiet intelligence embedded in this ancient world. The field stretches endlessly before you, a testament to adaptation, resilience, and the subtle power of evolution, providing a rich, immersive environment that rewards careful observation and invites a continuous sense of discovery. You pause on a slight rise, the wind brushing softly across your face as it moves through the towering fronds, carrying with it a subtle mix of scents and the faint, rhythmic sound of leaves brushing together. The field stretches endlessly, a living carpet of green, punctuated occasionally by clusters of smaller plants that thrive in the microhabitats created by the American ferngrass. Each step reveals more about the ecosystem's intricacies, the way sunlight filters through the canopy, illuminating tiny spores drifting lazily in the air, or how shadows shift in response to the movement of leaves and branches. You notice that even the tiniest variations in the terrain influence the growth and distribution of the plants, forming natural corridors and pockets where moisture accumulates, creating ideal conditions for seedlings to establish. The fronds sway gently, a choreography that seems almost conscious, guiding your eyes across patterns that repeat and diverge in ways that hint at long evolutionary histories. You lean closer to examine the stems and observe the ridged textures and segmented structures that provide both flexibility and strength, allowing the plants to withstand wind and shifting water levels without damage. The subtle differences in color and height across the field tell a story of adaptation, lighter green fronds near water sources, darker shades on the slopes, and occasional bluish hues indicating stress or competition for resources. Small insects move along the fronds and stems, their motions synchronized with the gentle sway of the plants, suggesting a coevolutionary rhythm that has been maintained over countless generations. You realize that these patterns, so easy to overlook at first glance, carry critical information about survival strategies, nutrient distribution, and microclimate regulation. As you continue, you begin to notice the deceptive simplicity of the field, the way clusters of fronds obscure what lies beneath, how shadows and light create illusions of open spaces or pathways, and how the arrangement of plants could easily mislead any observer, human or animal. The air feels alive with these subtle interactions, a dynamic interplay that blends the physical and biological aspects of the ecosystem into a seamless whole. You take a step carefully along a natural corridor, noting how the roots intertwine beneath the surface, sharing nutrients and stabilizing the soil, supporting both the American ferngrass and neighboring plants. Each movement through the field is an exercise in observation, revealing the depth of planning and adaptation embedded in the plant's forms and distributions. You notice how the taller fronds provide shade, moderating temperature and humidity below, while allowing smaller plants and seedlings to access light and space, creating a balanced microhabitat that fosters diversity. The hum of life surrounds you, subtle movements, the shifting of fronds, the occasional flutter of a small insect, all contributing to the sense that this environment is both alive and highly organized. As you pause to observe a particularly dense cluster of fronds, you see patterns repeating in complex yet coherent ways, each variation indicating evolutionary responses to past climates, soil conditions, and interactions with other organisms. The field becomes a living library of adaptation, resilience, and subtle intelligence, each plant a page that tells a story of survival, competition, and cooperation across deep time. You feel a growing appreciation for the scale and sophistication of this ecosystem, understanding that what may appear simple or static is in fact dynamic and responsive, a network of interactions that has persisted and evolved over millions of years. Each new observation prompts questions about how early life forms, including the first terrestrial animals, might have navigated and interacted with this landscape, guided and sometimes misled by the architecture of the plants around them. You continue moving, absorbing the scale, the texture, the rhythm, and the nuanced interactions, a rich immersion into an ancient world where every detail, from the smallest frond to the largest cluster, holds information about the intricate and enduring balance of life. Moving deeper into the ancient field, you begin to notice subtle changes in elevation and soil composition that influence the growth patterns of the American ferngrass. Small rivulets of water trace winding paths across the terrain, their surfaces reflecting the sunlight in shimmering threads that guide your eye across the landscape. The fronds above sway gently, their movement coordinated with the breeze, creating a rolling wave effect that gives the field a sense of fluidity despite its anchored roots. You kneel to examine a section where several stems converge, noticing how the root networks intertwine beneath the surface, sharing nutrients and moisture in a cooperative system that maintains the stability of the soil and supports diverse plant life. Tiny spores float lazily through the air, carried by subtle currents, settling in pockets of fertile soil to give rise to new growth, while delicate seedlings push upward, their leaves reaching for light amid the taller fronds that cast patterned shadows across the ground. In this immersive environment, the patterns of growth, light, and shadow form a complex code, revealing insights into ancient ecological strategies and interactions that are difficult to perceive at first glance. You observe the interplay between older and younger fronds, how the older growth provides structural support and protection, while younger fronds capture maximum sunlight, a dynamic balance that has been perfected over countless generations. The wind stirs the fronds, producing a rhythmic rustle that blends with the faint hum of insects and the subtle movement of other small organisms navigating the undergrowth. Each sensory detail contributes to your understanding of the ecosystem, reinforcing the notion that what appears static is in fact highly dynamic, with constant subtle adjustments in response to environmental cues. You notice how slight variations in moisture and light affect the height, color, and orientation of fronds, creating a patchwork of microenvironments that accommodate a variety of organisms, each finding its niche within the larger community. As you walk along a narrow corridor formed by natural openings in the dense growth, you recognize how early observers, both human and animal, could have been misled by the deceptive uniformity and repeating patterns, perceiving false pathways or clearings that did not truly exist. The American ferngrass, through its arrangement and growth strategies, subtly shapes perception and influences the behavior of creatures interacting with it, demonstrating a level of ecological sophistication that belies its simple appearance. You take a moment to examine a particularly dense cluster of fronds, noting the ridged stems and segmented structure that provide both flexibility and resilience, allowing them to bend without breaking and to recover quickly from environmental stress. Sunlight filters through the canopy in shifting patterns, illuminating patches of ground, highlighting clusters of smaller plants that depend on the microclimate created by the taller fronds for survival. You begin to appreciate the layered complexity, how nutrient cycles, water retention, light availability, and interspecies interactions all integrate to form a cohesive and resilient ecosystem. Each observation deepens your awareness of how adaptive strategies over millions of years have shaped this field, influencing not only the American ferngrass itself but also the broader community of organisms that inhabit this space. The gentle slope rises further, revealing subtle changes in plant coloration and density, hints of moisture gradients and sun exposure, each detail encoding information about past environmental conditions and evolutionary pressures. The small movements of insects, the swaying of fronds, and the play of light and shadow all contribute to a symphony of subtle cues, guiding your perception and enhancing your understanding of this intricate living system. Standing amidst the undulating green expanse, you feel a growing sense of connection to the deep time history of the ecosystem, recognizing that the American ferngrass is not merely a plant, but a participant in an ancient narrative, a silent architect of its environment, shaping the patterns of life in ways both visible and hidden, a testament to the quiet, persistent power of adaptation and resilience over millions of years. As you move along the gentle slope, the light shifts, casting longer shadows that accentuate the textures and layers of the American ferngrass field. Every frond seems to have a story, the way it twists and bends, capturing sunlight, shading the ground below, and creating a microclimate for countless smaller plants and creatures. You notice the subtle interactions between different clusters, how slight variations in height and density influence airflow, humidity, and light penetration, forming patterns that have likely guided animals and early human observers for generations. There is an almost imperceptible rhythm to the movement of the fronds, a cadence created by the wind and the natural architecture of the plants, a rhythm that shapes perception and draws your eyes across the landscape in a gentle dance. You bend closer to a dense patch and observe the intricate structure of the stems, their segmented forms providing both flexibility and support, allowing them to sway in response to the wind without breaking. And you realize that these adaptations have been fine-tuned over millions of years to maximize survival in varying conditions. Tiny insects move along the leaves and stems, their paths seemingly influenced by the subtle inclinations and angles of the fronds, a delicate choreography that hints at coevolutionary relationships maintained over countless generations. The sunlight glints off water droplets, revealing miniature reflections of the surrounding ecosystem, a kaleidoscope of life that changes with each shift in perspective. You begin to appreciate how early observers might have been misled by these visual cues, interpreting false pathways or clearings where none truly existed, and how the plant's physical arrangement contributed to this optical deception, guiding behavior and movement in subtle ways. The hum of life around you is constant yet gentle, the rustle of leaves, the movement of small organisms, and the faint whisper of the wind, all combining into a symphony that underscores the complexity of the ecosystem. Each element of the field, from the roots weaving underground to the tallest fronds above, participates in a network of interactions that regulate moisture, nutrient distribution, and microclimate, sustaining both plant and animal life in a balanced system. As you walk, you notice the gradual changes in color and density of the fronds, subtle gradients that indicate shifts in soil moisture, nutrient availability, and sunlight exposure, each variation telling a story of adaptation and resilience. The patterns repeat and diverge in a way that suggests long-term ecological memory, a landscape shaped not only by immediate conditions but also by the accumulation of evolutionary strategies across deep time. You pause to observe a cluster of fronds that seem to rise higher than the rest, casting a cool shadow on the ground below, providing shelter and stabilizing the microenvironment, allowing seedlings and smaller plants to establish. The coordination between taller and shorter fronds, between older and younger growth, creates a self-regulating ecosystem that maintains stability while remaining responsive to subtle environmental cues. The wind carries the scent of damp earth and the faint aroma of the plants themselves, reinforcing the sensory connection to this living landscape, where every detail matters and contributes to the overall function of the ecosystem. You begin to see the field as a complex system of feedback loops and interactions, where even minor variations in stem placement or leaf orientation can influence the distribution of light, water, and nutrients, subtly guiding the behavior of other organisms within the space. The deeper you venture, the more apparent it becomes that the American ferngrass is not a passive backdrop but an active participant in its environment, shaping both perception and ecological dynamics. Every movement, every glance reveals new relationships and patterns, emphasizing the intelligence embedded in natural form and the persistent influence of evolutionary design. The field extends endlessly, a living testament to adaptation, subtlety, and resilience, inviting careful observation and rewarding those who take the time to notice the interwoven stories of life encoded within its fronds, stems, and roots, a narrative that has quietly unfolded over millions of years and continues to shape the ancient landscape in ways both visible and hidden. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows across the field, the American ferngrass appears almost alive, the fronds bending and twisting in response to the gentle breeze, creating a shifting mosaic of green that seems to move with a rhythm of its own. You notice subtle variations in the height and angle of each frond, revealing the adaptive strategies that have allowed this species to thrive for millions of years, balancing light capture, water retention, and resilience against environmental fluctuations. Tiny droplets of dew cling to the edges of leaves, catching the sunlight and scattering it in miniature rainbows, a visual testament to the intricate structures that have evolved over deep time. As you continue your exploration, the patterns in the field become increasingly complex, with clusters of fronds forming natural corridors and sheltered pockets that influence the movement and behavior of smaller organisms. You observe insects navigating these pathways with remarkable precision, their tiny legs and wings guided by the subtle cues in the environment, and you realize that the layout of the plants has likely shaped countless interactions over evolutionary timescales. The interplay of light, shadow, and movement creates illusions of depth and open space, challenging your perception and illustrating how easily early observers could have been misled about the true nature of the landscape. Each frond, each cluster, is a product of countless generations of adaptation, a living record of survival strategies honed through competition, environmental change, and interaction with other species. You bend closer to examine a single frond in detail, noting the ridges and segments that provide both flexibility and strength, allowing it to sway with the wind without breaking, while optimizing photosynthesis and moisture management. The wind carries a symphony of sounds, the gentle rustle of leaves, the faint hum of insect activity, and the subtle movements of other small creatures, all combining to form an immersive sensory experience that reinforces the interconnectedness of the ecosystem. You notice the way the taller fronds provide shade and protection for smaller plants and seedlings, creating microclimates that foster biodiversity and resilience within the field. Patterns in leaf orientation and density reveal how the plants optimize light exposure, minimize water loss, and create stable habitats for dependent species, a sophisticated network of interactions that has developed over deep time. As you move through the field, you become increasingly aware of the deceptive simplicity of the scene. What appears uniform and static from a distance is in fact a dynamic, responsive, and interconnected system, with each component influencing the others in ways that are both subtle and profound. You begin to consider the broader implications of these interactions, how the American ferngrass has likely influenced the behavior and distribution of other organisms, including early terrestrial animals, by shaping movement, foraging strategies, and habitat selection. Every observation reinforces the sense of deep evolutionary intelligence embedded within the structure of the field, illustrating the intricate balance of life that has persisted through countless cycles of growth, decay, and renewal. The sun continues its arc across the sky, illuminating new aspects of the landscape and revealing additional layers of complexity in the distribution of fronds, seedlings, and microhabitats. Each shift in perspective offers fresh insights into the subtle mechanisms that sustain this ecosystem, emphasizing that the American ferngrass is not merely a passive element but an active participant in shaping its environment. The field stretches endlessly, its patterns of light, shadow, and movement, creating a living tapestry that communicates the history, resilience, and adaptability of life over millions of years. You take a slow, deliberate walk along a narrow path through the fronds, absorbing the scale, rhythm, and quiet intelligence of the environment, recognizing that every detail, from the smallest stem to the largest cluster, contributes to the cohesion and function of the ecosystem. As the day progresses, the interwoven patterns of growth, light, moisture, and interaction become ever more apparent, highlighting the depth of adaptation and the subtle power of evolutionary processes that have created a field that is at once beautiful, complex, and enduring, a testament to the persistence and ingenuity of life over deep time. As the day begins to fade and the sunlight softens across the field, the American ferngrass takes on a warm, golden hue, the fronds catching the last rays and casting elongated shadows that ripple across the terrain. You pause to absorb the view, noticing how the interplay of light and structure continues to reveal new layers of complexity, from the smallest seedlings emerging in the shade of taller fronds to the intricate root networks stabilizing the soil beneath your feet. The gentle breeze animates the entire field, creating waves of movement that seem almost deliberate, guiding your gaze and inviting a closer examination of patterns that have evolved over millions of years. As you walk slowly along the natural corridors between clusters of fronds, you begin to appreciate the dynamic relationships between the plants, the microclimate they create, and the smaller organisms that inhabit the spaces in between, each dependent on subtle shifts in light, moisture, and shelter. Tiny spores drift lazily through the air, settling in pockets of soil where they will take root and continue the cycle of growth, reproduction, and adaptation, reinforcing the idea that the field is not static but a continuously evolving system. The sounds of rustling leaves, the distant movement of insects, and the whisper of wind through the fronds form a harmonious background that underscores the interconnectedness of this ancient ecosystem, reminding you that every element has a role in maintaining balance and resilience. You observe how the density of the fronds influences airflow and humidity, creating microhabitats that support biodiversity, from tiny seedlings to the small creatures that traverse the undergrowth, each movement contributing to the rhythm and function of the environment. The gradients of color and height across the field tell stories of past environmental conditions, patterns of adaptation, and evolutionary strategies, providing insight into how the American ferngrass has persisted and thrived in the face of shifting climates and ecological challenges. You notice subtle cues in the leaves and stems that indicate interactions with other species, competition for resources, and collaborative survival strategies that have developed over deep time, revealing the sophistication inherent in what might seem at first glance to be a simple plant community. The interplay of sunlight, shadow, and movement creates visual illusions, pathways that appear navigable but are in fact deceptive, illustrating how perception can be influenced by the physical structure of the plants themselves, a feature that may have guided or misled early observers and animals navigating the landscape. You pause to examine a particularly dense patch where multiple generations of fronds overlap, observing how older fronds provide support and shade while younger growth maximizes photosynthesis, an elegant system of balance and resilience. Tiny insects and small organisms move through this area with precision, their paths influenced by the placement and angle of leaves, a subtle choreography that speaks to the coevolution of species over millennia. The field stretches in every direction, a living record of adaptation and survival, each detail from stem to frond, root to spore, contributing to the coherence and function of the ecosystem. You feel a profound sense of connection to the deep history encoded in the landscape, recognizing that the American ferngrass is not merely a background element but an active participant, shaping patterns of life, influencing perception, and sustaining a dynamic, interconnected network of organisms. The sun continues to descend, casting longer shadows that highlight the contours and textures of the field, emphasizing the layered complexity and quiet intelligence of the system. Each movement of air, each subtle shift in light, and each rustle of a frond adds to the rich tapestry of interactions, providing endless insight into the mechanisms of survival, adaptation, and ecological balance. Standing amidst the rolling green waves, you realize that this field is a chronicle of deep time, a testament to the persistence and ingenuity of life, and a vivid reminder that even the simplest forms of life hold profound influence over their environment, shaping perception, guiding interactions, and leaving an enduring mark on the landscape that will persist for millions of years to come.